Valor is brought to you by e.l.f. Cosmetics. Anything is e.l.fing possible. One night in September of 2008, U.S. Army mechanic Vanessa Schieber was on a routine mission to deliver supplies to a base in Mosul, Iraq.
Most of the time, our convoys were in the middle of the night because they say that's the safety of the darkness. So we were traveling and one of the supply trucks breaks down. So we got out, took us maybe like 2-3 minutes to say, okay, there's no fixing this.
The truck had to be towed. Vanessa knew she had to be quick and get back on her vehicle. In combat areas, you can never assume you're safe.
And I get up from looking at the truck and hear this zip, and then you hear like tink, 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 and then all hell breaks loose. Because then the guys start yelling like, okay, fire from this direction, fire from 3 o'clock, fire from 9 o'clock. I was getting ready to climb into it because I was driving. And as I was having my arms on the side to pull myself up, I remember I felt like someone just kicked me in the side of my ribs.
Slowly, Vanessa realized what had just happened. Her convoy had been caught in an ambush. She had just been shot. She was in pain. She couldn't move. She could barely breathe. And then Vanessa felt somebody grabbing her ankles and pulling her to the side of the road.
And it was a couple locals. I was like, oh my, what's happening? What's going on? And then I remember looking up again, and this guy was sort of on top of me, putting a towel on the side of my ribs. And then I started noticing, I was like, okay, I think they're actually trying to help me here. And the next thing I remember, I was already on the helicopter being flown out.
Vanessa had suffered 3 shattered ribs and a punctured lung. She went through rounds of surgeries and intensive physical therapy. The military gave Vanessa a choice. She could be discharged or she could continue serving.
They told me like, okay, we could chapter you out. I mean, you have enough damage to say like, okay, you're good. And I was like, no, honestly, I would actually like to stay. Like, do you think I can like get back to a shape where I can just do my job again? And they're like, well, we can get you there.
Hi, I'm Deshauna Barber, a proud U.S. Army veteran and former Miss USA. This is Valor, a podcast highlighting the stories of incredible women who have served our country. In this episode, we are telling the story of Vanessa Schieber, an Army veteran and 2-time recipient of the Purple Heart. The Purple Heart honors those who have been wounded or killed in action while serving in the U.S. Armed Forces. It's one of the ways we recognize the valor and sacrifice so many have made. After Vanessa received her first Purple Heart, she continued serving in the U.S. Army. She championed high-performance teamwork, and the camaraderie she found in those teams brought meaning to Vanessa's life. Even though Vanessa is no longer in the military, she lives these values in powerful ways. And a final note, when we spoke to Vanessa, she was taking care of her newborn daughter. Occasionally, you'll hear her daughter crying in the background. This episode is brought to you by e.l.f. Cosmetics. e.l.f. is making the best of beauty accessible to every eye, lip, and face, while staying true to their purpose of encouraging self-expression, embodying ethics, and empowering others. This is the story of Vanessa Schieber, who has stayed true to her purpose throughout her life. There are a few common ways to join the Army. Some people enlist after high school. Others go to a service academy. I became a commissioned officer after serving in ROTC in college. But Vanessa's path was a lot more unconventional.
So I was born and raised in Munich. So I'm very, very partial to the Bavarian background. It's the most beautiful area in Germany. So I spent my childhood there. I was born there, went to school there all the way up until I was 18.
Vanessa's parents owned an auto repair shop. Her mother ran the business and her dad was the head mechanic. But Vanessa spent most of her time somewhere else, on the tennis court. She played competitively throughout her childhood and teenage years throughout Europe. She was really, really good. She even played against a few names you'd recognize. In fact, Vanessa was so good, she received a scholarship to play tennis at the University of Louisville. And there was something else that drew her to America. A man.
He was stationed in Hohenfels, Germany. He was a tanker.
He was a soldier in the United States Army.
We met at the well-known Oktoberfest. Met him in a beer tent, exchanged numbers, and then things went from there. He knew he's going to have to leave fairly soon. He's getting orders, and he, I don't want to leave you here. And I don't want to be, split up all over the U.S. if you go. So that's when he asked me to marry him, and I got married with 18.
So Vanessa moved to the United States. She was a military spouse and a college athlete. She studied business. But as graduation approached, she realized that a business career was not in her future.
So I was like, I don't know if that was the right choice. Maybe I should have studied something different. But I was 2 classes away from graduating. So I was like, well, might as well finish and then go from there.
That's when Vanessa thought of joining the military herself.
We lived on base in Fort Knox. And so I always had these surroundings. And in my head, I also knew to a degree, I could use a little bit more discipline. And I could, get my head set straight a little bit more.
And Vanessa knew exactly what she wanted to do in the military. She wanted to become a mechanic like her father.
And I felt like I'm going to do my dad proud if I do that too.
Vanessa enlisted in 2007. She was no longer a military spouse. She was now a soldier herself. First, she'd have to go to basic training, which you might know better as boot camp. But before Vanessa left for boot camp, her husband gave her some advice.
He told me, okay, in basic, try to stay under the radar, fitness-wise, what to expect with a PT test.
And actually, Vanessa enjoyed boot camp.
I was like, this is so cool. It's just like the movies.
She just had a little trouble keeping a straight face.
And I had the problem that someone was yelling at me.
Keep your formation! Sir, yes, sir!
I had to try not to laugh or try not to grin. So that became my problem throughout basic training. But I got really good at doing push-ups. Every time I was grinning or laughing, I was in the corner doing push-ups.
During boot camp, Vanessa and her fellow soldiers were drilled that there was no difference between being a female or a male soldier. At the end of the day, they were all the same. They were soldiers serving the same country. After basic training, Vanessa trained as an Army mechanic. She also trained in service and recovery, learning to retrieve and fix military vehicles in combat areas. Soon after, Vanessa deployed to Iraq, and she quickly saw that male and female soldiers were treated very differently.
At the time, for my first deployment, they tried to keep the women, they didn't want them outside the wire. Outside the wire was basically as soon as you would leave your FOB or your forward operating base. So as soon as those gates open and you step out, that's when you're outside the wire. As a mechanic, I was only allowed to do my stuff on a motor pool.
This made no sense to Vanessa. She had extensive training, but the combat exclusion policy was still in place, and Vanessa's superior officers were reluctant to send her outside the base.
I was like, well, but we have plenty of mechanics here, and you don't have enough people to do service and recovery. Those guys keep rotating shifts and they're getting tired. So can I please go?
Was Vanessa frustrated? Absolutely. But she was also persistent. For 3 months, she kept asking to do the job she had spent so much time training for. Her superiors kept saying no. But eventually, somebody gave her a chance.
Thankfully, I had a good motor sergeant that had my back, and he was saying okay, she knows what she's doing. At least let her try. So he gave me the opportunity to show what I know.
And Vanessa did exactly that. She proved herself. She was a good mechanic who took her job very seriously. And as a woman, she also had a few physical advantages.
The advantage I had was just my hands are a lot smaller and my arms were smaller. So when it came to getting into an engine block or pulling out a starter on a 5-ton, it was easier for me to actually maneuver in there. And sometimes I didn't even have to use a wrench for a nut. I was able to just unscrew it with my fingers. And so I know a lot of my motor sergeants was oh, we're so glad to have you, because most of the guys, they can't get in there, and it takes them forever.
Vanessa proved her worth. Her fellow mechanics took her in as one of their own.
Once they can see that, they included me a lot more. It is a process. You have to go through proving yourself and showing that you know what you're doing, and then they will take you into the circle.
And as we know, Vanessa began serving outside the wire. There's that expression you sometimes hear, "She's one of the guys." I'm not a fan of that phrase because it implies that girls can't be a part of the team, and that's simply not true. But there is something special about being a part of a team, and there is no team like the military. You are always working for a cause greater than yourself. The absolute best is demanded of you, and the moments you experience create a unique bond that is like nothing else. And that bond is why Vanessa decided to re-enlist after receiving her first Purple Heart. Vanessa returned to the United States and began the next chapter in her Army career. Soon, she realized her life was about to look much different.
In preparation for deployments, you go through something that's called SRP, which is a medical processing. You get your shots and vaccinations up to date. They check on you on certain things. And I was in SRP, and they told me, well, can you come talk to us for a minute? And they're like, well, so you're pregnant. I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm having a child while in the Army.
She gave birth to a baby boy. But 5.5 months later, Vanessa deployed again. Her husband was also deploying, so Vanessa's mother-in-law took care of the baby.
So she came from Pennsylvania, drove all the way to Texas to come pick him up and went back. And it was about 2 days later, we were on a bus. Like, Fort Bliss has its own little airport there for the planes. And it was a plane, like half of the people on there were ladies that just had their babies. It was quite a somber mood on that plane.
Vanessa missed her child dearly. Vanessa's base had internet access, and she had numerous phone and video calls with her baby. Vanessa's mother-in-law also documented every day of the baby's young life.
She created like a blog online where she would put pictures and videos of what he was doing every day with like a little note. So I could like follow along, like how his day went, what was going on. And then on certain days we would set up and say like, okay, we're gonna Skype. So even though I know like when they're really little, they don't see so much yet, but at least I was like, at least he can hear me.
Being an active duty military parent entails a lot of sacrifice. You miss your child's milestones. All you want to do is hold your baby close, but you're halfway across the world.
I missed him sitting up for the first time. I missed him crawling.
But Vanessa was able to make it home in time for one of her son's biggest moments.
We got to see him take his first steps, so that was nice.
During the next phase of Vanessa's career, she was stationed in her native Germany, just 2 hours from her parents. She rose up the ranks to become a staff sergeant. In 2016, she deployed to Afghanistan. Like in Iraq, Vanessa was doing service and recovery. And one day in December, she and her driver were out on a recovery mission.
We were supposed to pick up a vehicle. I think we were on the road for maybe 5 to 10 minutes. And it was a really slanted road. We were in, it's called the Kunar province, so you have a lot of mountainous area. So I just remember this sort of like impact. Like when you like something hits you and it's like this really quick impact. So we felt that, and basically we had an IED that went off.
An IED is an improvised explosive device. It's a roadside bomb, and it had just hit their vehicle.
And because the road was so slanted, it tipped our vehicle over, so we like rolled over to the side. It crushed our cabin a little bit, and I think my downfall was more that my driver, who was a good-sized guy, ended up falling on top of me and like crushing me underneath of him. So I was laying there, and for him, that was the first time anything ever happened to him. So he was freaking out, and he was like wiggling around. He was trying to like get away and get off of me, and every time he did that, I felt my back cracking, and I just told him, I was like, just please stop moving, because this hurt.
Vanessa was literally being crushed by her fellow soldier. She desperately needed medical attention. Soon, she was rescued.
Put me on a stretcher, called in the medevac again, back on a helicopter. They flew us down to Kabul. That's where their main trauma center was. They did some scans. He came out and he just looked at me. He was like, so, we're gonna fly out to Germany immediately.
Vanessa's injuries were serious. Doctors found that 9 of Vanessa's vertebrae were broken. Her spine was also badly injured. The operations that followed were excruciating, and so was the rehabilitation journey. For a long time, Vanessa had to remain in bed so her bones could heal.
I was in bed for about a month and a half, 2 months maybe. They do come in and they will do exercises where the physical therapist will move your legs for you, and so you don't lose let's say flexibility in it. But they didn't want me to lift my legs up myself because there is a possibility you strain your back. I was completely dependent on them.
Recovery took a heavy toll on Vanessa physically, but Vanessa's mental health was also suffering. She wondered if she would ever be able to return to her old self.
During that time, I was extremely depressed. For me, my life was over because in my head I was thinking I'm not going to run again, I'm not going to play tennis again, none of the things I'm used to doing I'm going to be able to do again. So that hit me really hard. Then on top of it is they will eventually sit you down, talk to you, okay, so you're not going to be able to perform what they call basic soldiering skills anymore, right? So you're not going to be able to carry a rucksack. You're not going to be able to do this anymore. So this is the point where we're going to medically retire you from the Army. And even though in your head you're okay, I understand, it is crushing because I wanted to make it a career. I wanted to do my at least 20 years. And you're more or less being told, well, you're kind of useless to us now, so bye. But that's what it felt like, at least. Recovering from that was tough.
It was a dark time in Vanessa's life. She was in constant pain, and the road to recovery would be long. She had also separated from her husband. Her life was at a daunting crossroads. But there was a light in her life. Her son, who was now 8 years old, was by her side.
In my head, I was okay, even though I didn't want to get up for physical therapy because I was just defeated, but I'm going to have to get myself to a point where I can go outside and play with him, or where I can do these things with him. He made me feel better. He made me laugh. I remember there were days he would come in and he had this little plush tiger, and he came in one day and there were Band-Aids all over the back of that tiger. And I looked at it, I was like, what happened to him? And he's like, oh, he had a back problem too. So I did what the doctors did and I fixed him just like they did with you. And so he had his own way of bringing light to the situation and lifting my spirits up. He was my hero in those instances. Even after he went back to the US with his dad, that was my inspiration, was I'm gonna get better so I can get back to my son. So that was what kept me going from that point on.
It took over a year before Vanessa was cleared to leave the hospital. She had made a lot of progress on her physical recovery. But not every scar is visible. Vanessa was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. She entered an inpatient VA PTSD program in New Jersey. She would stay there for 3 months.
It was strictly combat-related PTSD. And that was an interesting experience because I was, once again, the only woman there. But you have veterans from any kind of generation. We had Vietnam veterans there, guys that were in Kosovo. We had one guy that was in Somalia. So you get to meet different people with different backgrounds, but yet still share, in a way, the same story.
Even though they were different ages, these combat veterans understood each other. They shared experiences that only other veterans could relate to. Their days were filled with classes and activities to help them work through their struggles.
like anger management to grounding exercises. We had yoga, mindfulness. And then on Tuesdays and Thursdays, it was your trauma group, which those were the tough groups. That's when they put like certain veterans together that share similar experiences. And they put you in a room with a counselor. And then you're there for like 2 hours and they're like, okay, so who wants to share or talk about anything from when you were overseas? And usually it starts out with the first 10 minutes of just cricket because no one wants to say anything. And then eventually, you start talking, lots of tears, which I think at first the guys struggled a little bit because they're like, oh, I don't want to cry in front of a girl. And I told them, I was like, I'm not going to think any less of you. Just, I want you to get better as much as I want to get better. So let's just, get all this out of the way. And they took me in just like, my mechanic buddies did.
These veterans became her friends and her support system. They still lean on each other to this day.
A lot of them are really good friends of mine now. And we like to sometimes just check up on each other. Like, okay, how are you doing? Or we know, like, this specific day, like, we call them, like, anniversaries or alive days or things like that. So we know exactly, like, okay, that's a tough day. Let me call, see, are you doing okay? Do you want to go out to dinner? Do you want to do something? I guess you can call it a band of brothers in a way, because you help each other out.
Vanessa knows firsthand how difficult it is to live with PTSD. And she has some advice for how to support a veteran in your life who might be struggling.
So I struggled with panic attacks and flashbacks. My now husband, for example, he is really aware of these things. The only real thing you can do in that situation is to make sure that you make that person feel safe and you make them aware of the fact, like, look around you. You're at home, you're in a safe space. You're not where you think you are. Try to focus on the picture on the wall. There are just these people that are just like, oh, just get over it. Or they freak out with you in a way, which makes the situation worse. So I guess the best advice I can give is, if you know someone that is a veteran that could struggle with PTSD, is to remain calm around them and to be understanding of what they're trying to tell you. Like, don't judge them. Don't make them feel like they're crazy. Be understanding.
Even though Vanessa's time in the Army ended after her second injury, her passion for her fellow veterans is stronger than ever. Today, Vanessa is in the process of setting up a nonprofit called Veterans Reaching Across Borders. It's another example of the incredible teamwork Vanessa champions, the sort of teamwork you can find in every branch of the armed forces.
The idea behind it is I want to get veterans together that transferred into teaching roles or social work, social services, and get those type of veterans together and eventually go back to certain places that we have served in. Doesn't necessarily have to be just Iraq, Afghanistan. It could be the area around Bosnia, Kosovo, just areas where we know that they lack education, they lack certain social services, and go back there and do something good in a way. So we're helping the people in those areas. But I think it's also something that is rewarding for those veterans and maybe even help resolve certain traumas that they have.
After transitioning to civilian life, Vanessa became an educator. She went back to school and received her PhD from Rutgers University. Today, she is a high school teacher and a mother of 2. Her son is now 15 years old, and he plans to study mechanical engineering and become an Air Force pilot. And Vanessa is enjoying her maternity leave with her daughter, who you heard a little bit throughout the interview. Serving in uniform comes with great personal sacrifice. And Vanessa's story is an incredible illustration of just how powerful those sacrifices can be. Remember, not every scar is physical. This is not just why we honor our veterans, but it's also why being there for those who have served is so important. To Vanessa, and to all the veterans that answered America's call to serve this nation, we thank you. In a moment, we'll ask Vanessa her advice for women and young girls who want to serve in the military and much more. Stay with us. Vanessa, thank you so much for telling your story. What advice do you have for women and young girls who would like to serve in the military?
To stick to your gut. Like, don't let them talk you into a job you don't want to do. If you feel like you're especially now that you are women are able to do combat jobs. If you feel like you're capable to do it, go for it. Like, don't let them talk you down. And then I told that to my soldiers at the time too, is like the same thing I went through. Prove yourself. Show them that you're capable of doing your job.
Do you have any beauty hacks from your time in the military?
I would have to say, during my time, rules were a bit stricter. Colors had to be matching to the uniform. So my advice was always keep it simple. Don't go over top. So for me, it was mainly just like, foundation stuff to, not show the rings under my eyes because I never slept and things like that. And then I said, like, focus on the eyes. That's like my big thing is like just mascara, stuff like that.
Do you have a favorite e.l.f. product?
So actually there's 2. There's one, it's a primer that basically you use up before any other kind of makeup. If you have any like redness or like your wrinkles that start coming through, it kind of like smoothens that out. And I'm really big on like lip gloss and like anything for the lips. So it's like a lip balm, but it tastes almost like raspberries, and I love it. Like I can use that all day.
And our final question. When we say anything is e.l.f.ing possible, what does that mean to you?
I would like go right back into women in the military. Anything is possible. Like, we can do certain jobs. We can be in combat. We can get hurt and recover. We can have babies while in the military. And then turn out and give back to other veterans and communities.
On behalf of myself and e.l.f. Cosmetics, we'd like to thank Vanessa Schieber for her service and for sharing her incredible story with us. In our next and final episode, we'll hear from Marine Corps veteran Elizabeth Stevens, the first woman to fly the MV-22 Osprey. And as you wait for the next episode, I ask you to think about the people in your life. Reach out to them. Make sure you are there for them whenever they need you the most. I'm Deshauna Barber. Anything is e.l.f.ing possible. If you would like to learn more about how you can help or donate to women veterans, check out Woven, the Women Veterans Network at wovenwomenvets.org. Woven's mission is to provide a unique social network of women veterans to foster connections and built relationships in local communities and across the nation. Valor is produced by Emerald Audio, an imprint of Diversion. Be sure to follow the podcast to get notifications about new episodes. My name is Deshauna Barber, and I hosted this episode. This episode was directed by Rex New, written by Sarah B., and was story edited by Rex New. Editing by Antonio Enriquez. Produced by Emma DeMuth. Leo Culp is our associate producer. Executive produced by Scott Waxman and Roy Laughlin. Check out emeraldaudio.net to learn more about this show and other shows we produce.